Hi, everybody. Good morning. It's exciting to be here at BrickCon again. Thank you for, it looks like many of you got into the interactive part of the presentation. That's awesome. You will have the opportunity to chime in at various points throughout the presentation and answer little questions and stuff, and hopefully make this a little bit more interactive and a little bit more fun. So today's talk is about the LEGO Parts Guide. The LEGO Parts Guide is an online resource that I have already built and launched, and it's also, I'm trying to turn it into a printed guide that you can have in your build space, hopefully to inspire people to be better builders. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means as we go through it. So what we're going to do is I will very briefly introduce myself. We're going to talk about the LEGO Parts Guide as it stands today. And then I'm going to present some of the challenges I've encountered trying to translate this online resource into a print book. And then also some of my proposed solutions, ways of solving those problems. And then, of course, that's where I'm really excited to get your feedback as well on what I can do to make it even better. So my story. I've been building for a very long time. On the left is a photo of me with one of my first mocks that I was proud enough of that I made my mom take a picture of me with it. And it's one of those old-fashioned McDonald's with the arches on the side. I'd never seen one in person, but there was like a 3D hologram on the back of a National Geographic from the 80s or something. And it was like, what is that? And then I learned a little more about it. And I actually took the little version on the left and I improved it a couple years later to the version that's on the right. And amazingly, my mom saved the mock. So I was actually, that picture is only a couple months ago. I was back in the East Coast, and I was able to see the mock I had built a gajillion years ago. And if you actually open it up, there's like the little bathrooms on the side and a little place for them to cook it's not a bad mock. I was like pretty proud of my little version of self. But my passion for building and my fondness for architecture, even though it's not my actual vocation, is what led me down the path of writing the book, The LEGO Architect. It's actually 10 years old now, which is cool. And it explores 7 styles of architecture with photos of real buildings, amazing LEGO models by a ton of talented builders, and then instructions to build something simple in that style. And I have been doing a bunch of other LEGO projects since. As I was actually writing the book, I realized I needed little labels to sort my drawers. I ended up sharing those labels with people, and then they kept asking me for more and more labels for more and more parts. And so it grew to like 2,500 labels while I was still manually creating every one of them by hand. And now I've moved that to the online experience we'll talk about in a minute. But doing all the labels kind of gave me a chance to connect with so many other builders and talk about how they sort their collection, how they make sense of their growing collection, and the unique needs of a small collection versus a large collection. So I wrote an ebook, an online guide. It's about 8 chapters of information, and it walks you through guidance for a family trying to sort a little collection, all the way up through the most nuts AFOLs, which are us, with maybe upwards of 1 million pieces sorted very, very finely. And my most recent LEGO journey has been, my son is now 6, and that is like peak kid LEGO, and he is having so much fun with the hobby, and that makes me have more fun with it, and I see it through a different lens, and that's been really fun. And yes, we did get to go to Denmark last year, and he mind blown. Me too, but he loved it. I've given several talks at BrickCon about topics sort of related to what we're talking about today. The last 2 talks I did were related to essentially the naming of the various, not the parts themselves, but the actual attributes within the parts. So if you think about a clip or a bar, or what do you call these things? And if you look at the naming across BrickLink, Rebrickable, BrickSet, et cetera, and the LEGO group themselves, the names are pretty inconsistent as to how they talk about the attributes of parts, which is what led me to the second presentation, which went kind of off the rails, but we had a lot of fun with it. And we were talking about various, the actual naming we should give to parts. Is that a lightsaber blade? Is it actually just a generic bar element? LEGO calls it a shaft. Shafts are funny. It was a good time. And that's what I've done in the past. And so that kind of all brought me to this point a year ago when I started creating this parts guide. And well, what is a parts guide? I will totally admit I'm not here yet, but this is sort of my overarching goal, and that is to create an indispensable tool that helps you really understand how Lego works a little bit better, find parts when you need them, get unblocked when you're building, and quite frankly, just make better models. Like, I'm not going to try to pretend I'm the best mock builder out there, but many of you are, and like if I could create a tool that helps you create even better models, I would be stoked as hell to do that. Like, that is just really cool to me. So here's where I'm at. This is, if you go to brickarchitect.com/parts, you will get a guide that looks like this. And the top level page gives you 12 categories. I'll talk a little more about those categories in a moment. And if you click on any one of those categories, you'll see that there's a page dedicated to all the parts within that category. Now, it's actually not every part, because I'm doing a bit of curation here and trying to highlight most specifically current parts by default, although there is a little tab. I don't have a, is this a laser? It is a laser. There's a little tab that switches between show current parts and all parts. So you can actually see retired parts that way. And then they're organized into subcategories. So you've got bricks, brackets, you've got the different kinds, and jumpers, I guess would be the 3 subcategories for SNOT. And it just is a very visual way of finding the things you're looking for, is the idea. And then if you click on one of those parts, this is part of the page that I think is the least developed, and I look forward to making it even richer. But it already shows you a high-res, big picture of the part. It shows you the link and name for that part used on all the other Lego websites. You've got Lego's Pick-a-Brick naming, BrickLink, Rebrickable, Brickset, Eldraw. And that's kind of relevant because different sites are calling these parts different ways. And also, by having those all clickable links, it's an easy way to get to more information. Like if you want to know what color it's in, I don't have that information yet. But you can go there and find that information, or what sets it's in, et cetera. So it's hopefully a pretty useful tool already. And then on the right, you see a link to download a label, because I was talking about how my labels had kind of outgrown sanity, and now the labels are programmatically generated on the website on the fly. And then above it is probably one of the more interesting things, which is unique to the site, which is I've tried to rank every part. And I felt like it was imperfect to rank just based on like the quantity of colors it comes in, because, okay, it might come in a lot of colors, but it's still hard to find. That's not necessarily a super highly ranked part. But also like the number of sets the part has been in, the sheer number of that part you would have. And if you want to imagine it visually, imagine you bought one of every Lego set ever produced, and you sorted all of those pieces by part and then by color. You would have a lot of information about the total library of parts that have been produced over the years. And speaking of which, if you want to, you can click on that ranking and see a list of literally the most common parts. And there's 2 tabs here. One is current, which is based on just sets from the last 5 years, which is a good proxy for what is a current part. And then you can look at parts from all time. And that list lets you go to the top maybe 3,500, 4,000 parts at this point. Honestly, I'm limited mostly by the ability to get good quality images of the parts. Because as you get, I'll talk about it later, but as you get to rarer parts, they're just not as, the images aren't available. So, and this is just like behind the scenes, like what is going on here? What has Tom built? What I've done is I've basically built a couple of tables of proprietary data, which is my part number, my custom naming for these parts, and then links out to the translation between the part number I use and the part numbers used by other sites. And I try to use the same part number wherever I possibly can, but even sometimes the Lego group and BrickLink, and BrickLink and the Lego group, which is the same company, don't always agree. So I have to do a little bit of data normalizing there. And then I'm able to sync in all the data from those other sources as well. So I could update that pretty quickly and keep that all up to date. So first question. I know some people gave thumbs up and other comments so far, but there's no right answer, but I'm just kind of curious, like, how many people have actually seen this experience, have had a chance to or learning about it for the first time? Awesome. I figured there'd be a spread, and that's actually great. Awesome. Cool. So several of you haven't heard about it at all, and then there's a nice distribution of people who have heard of it a little bit, or maybe use it a little bit, or maybe even have brought it into your everyday building. So that's awesome. So cool. Here's the big jump I'm trying to make. I want to turn this into a book that you can have in your house. And I don't know for sure, but I have this hypothesis that if there was a convenient, relatively up-to-date list of all the parts, really well organized, with a little bit of chapter text that helps you really grok and understand how these parts work together, that would be a really useful tool for the community. And hopefully it'll just sit next to wherever you build so you can come grab it as a sort of daily resource as a builder. And yeah, I'm in the process of making it. As you can see, I have a very crude early drafts because I've been using print-on-demand technology, so I can actually update it really easily, get another draft, and see how it, see my progress. But I still need to finish the chapter text. Those chapters, as you'll see in a second, have a lot of illustrations to make the story kind of come to life, and it takes time. So here is the way I've currently presented the sort of table of contents, which is here are the 12 main categories with icons that help you kind of internalize or grok what each category is about. And then this is the first chapter I've written sort of fully, and it's talking about basic parts. And to really understand Lego, you have to understand how pieces connect together. And what is that mysterious clutch power thing all about? And I've tried to explain visually that the way that really works is that the stud is just ever so slightly larger than the space it snaps into, and that causes the plastic to deflect out, which creates inward pressure, and that pressure creates the friction that is effectively clutch power. And I want to take that same illustrated and explanatory approach to the entire system of parts, all the connection pairs, so that you can really understand how all of this stuff works a little bit better. And then, of course, that same thing I've got on the online experience. I want to really replicate, having all the parts right in front of you with crisp images. They're not quite one-to-one scale. I've been doing about 2/3 of real size, which is usually seems to be big enough to really see the details of the parts without the book just becoming an unreasonable number of pages. And then there's various appendices that I'm already starting to work through. The first, of course, being I really need to recognize that people are supporting this project. I have a Patreon. I share a lot of the behind the scenes with that group of people, and I'm going to recognize them, of course. Then there's various appendices because I think it's important to show my work. One of the main things I have to explain is if I'm going to have this ranking concept and I'm going to try to have all the most common parts in the book, I need to help people understand what most common really means. And then a glossary, really building on that presentation I had done in the past where we try to define the right name for all of these anatomical units of a brick. I'm trying to put all that vocabulary there so that people can refer back to it. So I want to make a better guide. And that's why I'm presenting, because this is where the interactivity is going to ramp up a little bit today. So before I show anything else, I'd love to hear just the majority of your Lego collection. How do you sort it? Do you sort by just shape, by what we call part? Do you sort by color predominantly? Do you sort by a combination of part and color, which means the red headlight bricks are in a different bin than the blue ones, or some other approach? This is roughly the distribution I would expect of this group, which is a lot of people are sorting by shape predominantly, and then some people, probably with the very largest collections, are sorting by both part and color. It is pretty common for sorting by color alone to be very popular in the general population, but less popular within this group. And I'd love to hear from people, maybe in the Q&A at the end, what else you're doing, because it sounds like some of you are doing something else. All right, I'm going to keep going. So the first problem I've encountered, and I kind of alluded to this already, but just the problem of sorting parts is hard. Developing taxonomies or hierarchies is a science. It's hard for everybody. And if you look at what's happening in the Lego community as a whole, it's chaos. Bricklink, which is probably one of the most important tools to all of us, has, to be frank, terrible categories. And almost every part I care about is all in one category with a terrible name. Plate, comma, modified. Like, what is that? It doesn't really give you any idea of what the function of the part is. It just tells you that there was a plate on it somewhere. But like Rebrickable has a different approach, which is maybe a little bit closer to the approach I've been trying, which is a little bit more based on function. Lego Pick-a-Brick, this relatively recently developed something along these lines. Some of the categories make a lot of sense. Others are a little more confusing, like why are the Technic beams separate from everything else Technic? I don't quite get that. But you know, there's just this is a hard problem. I'm not going to try to make light of that. And this is what I've come to so far after a good deal of refinement. These are an evolution of the categories I used for my label collection as well, which had, I think, 2 or 3 more categories. I did a little bit of massaging. The biggest change that I made was I put anything that allows things to bend into a new category called articulation. And that includes both single direction of bending as well as full articulation of like a ball and socket style joint. But for most people, this seems to be landing well, but I'm obviously open to feedback. Which brings us to another question. Based on your everyday building, which category do you prefer today? Like, this is not about like whether, what you'd necessarily want to use in the future, but like what do you find works best for you so far? And you don't have to say mine because I made them. Like, I don't care. There's a lot of other that's interesting. Okay. Cool. I wasn't expecting that strong of a vote of confidence, but that's awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So I have one follow-up question, which is, if you were trying to use a resource that was organized into these 12 categories, do you feel like you would know where stuff is? I'm just trying to get a sense. Mix. All right. Cool. So the next challenge I've encountered in trying to produce this book is I would really like to include a little bit of the history of not the Lego company, but of Lego parts when it's in service of the overall narrative. The challenge I've encountered is that finding that history is actually quite hard. You will sometimes find little bits of the making of new parts in interviews with Lego set designers, because they will sometimes talk about the introduction of a new part to solve a problem in their build. We certainly have more information about newer parts than we have about older parts, just because the company is more forthcoming about the development process than they used to be. And there are 2 very useful books that give you insights into this topic. The first one, which is a fantastic book, is The Lego Story on the right here. The only challenge is it's not really about Lego bricks. It's mostly about the business. So there's actually some really good insights into the early story, like the development of the stud and tube connection. But there's not a lot of insight into a broader selection of parts. Now, The Secret Life of Lego Bricks is the best resource I've found. It is a very, very interesting book. It is also kind of strangely organized into these themes that don't really match into any sort of part categories. They're more about broader themes in the Lego group's history. So trying to glean like really interesting insights out of that book is a lot of work, but it is a really good resource. So the way I'm trying to do this is, let's just say each chapter has 2 to 4 pages of text and images. My hope is that I can go and do that research for you all and try to incorporate little nuggets of Lego history into the book when it makes sense, and then include it either in the body text or in the sort of the marginalia. So I guess my question for this group is like, I still got 11 chapters to write. Do you want a lot of history? Do you want a little bit of history? Do you not really want that much history? Like, I'm really trying to get a sense from this AFOL community, like how that changes the story. Cool. Well, we've got a lot in the interested camp and a fair number in the very interested camp. So that leads me in the direction I was kind of already going, which is to include history when it's in service of the narrative, but maybe not just history for history's sake. So thank you. That's really helpful. And then there's too many parts. So this chart is impossible to look at because there's almost no blue on it. And that is because this is that chart of if you took every set that they've ever released and sorted them by part, not by color, but sorted them by part. The most common part of all of them would be the 1x2 plate, and you would have 138,000 1x2 plates. The problem is you get to even like 800, the 800th most common part of all time, and you've dropped into some like microscopic fraction of that 138,000. In fact, the only way to even read this chart is to switch to a logarithmic scale, which is admittedly super nerdy, but we're at a LEGO convention. And if you can see, the left scale goes 1, 10, 100, 1,000, et cetera. And now you can finally kind of see what's going on. But okay, like that's a really long tail distribution. And this far right, which doesn't even get the blue color, those are the pieces that if you bought every set ever, you would have one part of that, and you wouldn't even have like an extra necessarily, and it would be in one color, and that part just, there's almost 2,000 of those parts, like totally one-off parts. So suffice to say, I don't know that a parts guide really needs to include a part that's quite that rare. Not to mention the fact that I can't even include it in the guide unless I have like a picture of the part. Speaking of pictures of the part, I'm using LDRAW as the data source to render these high-resolution images. And it's a little hard to parse these because the green and yellow don't have any meaning in this context. The green is just I've added it to my website. The yellow is I haven't bothered yet. But the gray is the part that's relevant. So if you look at the top chart, that's the current parts, so parts from the last 5 years. The gray swath is the rarer parts that we don't have in LDRAW yet, so I can't put a picture in the guide. But the good news for me is that you really only start encountering the parts that don't exist in LDRAW and therefore can't have pictures around the 2,000th most common part. The bottom chart is all years, and you just like, oh my gosh, there's just so many parts that aren't yet in the tool, so I can't include them very easily. So my proposal for dealing with this long tail issue is I'm just going to focus for now on current parts because they're the parts that most of us are building with most of the time. I also recognize that the book physically, it would become too thick or too costly if I included too many of the retired parts. My hope is that people can go online if they need to really dig into the long tail of rarer and retired parts. But I also know, like, okay, a whole bunch of you were interested to very interested in history. Retired parts are part of that history. And my question is, would you like to see a little bit of history in the book? And if so, how would you like that to be reflected? Would you rather me just include really interesting retired parts in whatever category or subcategory they fit in? Would you rather just go online to find that stuff? Or maybe a little section at the end of each chapter that highlights a couple of the coolest parts related to that category? Okay. So I'm getting sort of a mix of people who would prefer to see interesting retired parts in the category they fit in versus like maybe a little section at the end of each chapter talking about interesting parts. So that is helpful to me in the sense that I know that you are excited about learning about retired parts. It is less helpful to me because you're evenly split, but that's fine. I get to make the decision then. Thank you. So then another problem I've encountered is, man, there's an awful lot of parts that are basically identical, especially like identical visually. So these are flex tubes. There are, I believe I counted earlier today, there's 29 of them. And the only difference is their length. I could spend a whole page of my book showing you nearly identical parts if I wanted to. I could also just say, OK, what do people need to know? They need to know what it looks like. Maybe it'd be useful to have like a measurement guide that's like 1-to-1 scale instead of slightly zoomed out. And then a table. Like you want a 32L, it's 75C32. So same as before. I was getting from the thumbs up. I think I know the answer, but I'm curious if people had thoughts on this. That's like the survey that's not a survey. OK, cool. 0 preferred. OK. We'll stop worrying about that question anymore. I'll just do it that way. And then this is a personal stress. I work in software. I work in the world of AI. And I also recognize that people are increasingly anxious about AI-generated crap. Speaking of AI-generated crap, the LEGO group themselves created this weird mashup Ninjago thing using AI and got holy hell for it, because apparently the logo on his forehead is from some other IP. So like, whoops. So I feel like it's important to show my work and to really make sure this is perceived as credible. The way I'm planning on doing this is by including fairly generous citations throughout the book. Those are the little tiny what are they called? Superscripts, the tiny numbers. Whenever something in the book has an obvious data source that shows my work. And then my current thought is to have a very brief bibliography, like a traditional one, like list of books and sources in the back of the book, but then to have much more detailed citations online. So if you want to go type, Brick Architect /site and then type in the ID code, you could get like detailed citation information where I have the full quote that I was drawing my information from, and then my own sort of interpretations of the quotes. So that's my proposal. What I really want to know from this group is like, are citations important to you, or do you just kind of decide if you don't really need that information? And maybe like if you can put a text comment or in the Q&A, we can talk about it more. How you feel about doing like the online component of it. Cool. Awesome. So I'll keep doing that. That's sort of my takeaway there, is that is valuable. And that hopefully people will, even, click through and they want to learn more, and hopefully those resources will be helpful to people. Cool. I think this is my last question. Yeah, awesome. I see the comments. That's cool. DUPLO. So most people know that DUPLO is actually compatible with Lego. You can take a 2x2 or a 2x4 Lego brick, attach it to the top of a DUPLO brick, and then you can build Lego stuff on top of DUPLO stuff. I also recognize that very few of us AFOLs are building really epic mocks using obscure DUPLO parts. So my question for this group is, how do you feel about how much I should cover DUPLO in a Lego parts guide, ranging from trying to include most DUPLO parts, just like the ones that are like basic bricks, plates, slopes, curves maybe, or just a brief mention or nothing at all. Awesome. Well, that's what I'm currently planning on doing anyway, so that's great news that I'm sort of on the right direction there. So that is the end of my presentation of my progress so far and the challenges I've encountered along the way. I know that I sometimes, everyone gets a little myopic, might miss things. So I really would love to hear quickly through your phone, before we switch over to full Q&A, what it feels like I might be missing here. So what would make a printed guide like this even more useful? What would make it indispensable? What would make it be right next to where you build? I'm going to answer a couple as people keep typing. The book is currently planned to be a print-on-demand book, which means I can update it fairly frequently. Realistically, I think it's probably a once-a-year type thing, although I recognize I could update it like a couple times a year if I wanted to. I just don't think people want to like buy it that often. In terms of binding is interesting. Some people have suggested a 3-ring binder or some sort of spiral bound, presumably so you can open it, lay flat. I need to look into the feasibility of that. I think it could make sense for a lot of people to have that option, although I know it would be quite a bit more expensive. I'm just seeing if there's anything else I can respond to quickly. Where's the plates category? It's in basic. They have bricks, plates, tiles in that category. And I think that's probably making it an ebook. I think the answer to the ebook would be mostly just to use the online version of the guide that already exists would be my primary answer, and maybe there's ways to make that an even better complement to a print book. I think that's a great start. So thank you all, of course, for joining me in this conversation. We're going to go to Q&A in just a second, but I just wanted to close out the formal part of the presentation by thanking everybody. If you want to follow my progress, I have an email newsletter I send once a month. You could scan there or just go to brickarchitect.com/newsletter. And that'll be the best way to keep tabs on how this parts guide is evolving, both the online and the print version. So from there, let's go into some Q&A. I'm curious to hear what people want to know. There's a live mic as well as somebody helping with the online questions.
Yo.
Hi.
First off, thank you so much. When I was getting back into Lego as an AFL, your website was one of the first thing I found, and the fact that it's all free was insane to me. So just A, thank you. B, we are working on a process right now, and I just wanted to pitch this idea of I keep all of my Lego in these 4mm 4x6 plastic bags. And
Okay.
we 3D print a little jig to affix the label to, and we're trying to come up with a system for when we run out of a particular piece, how do we instantly in that moment go ahead and order more of that piece? What we are trying in this moment is attaching a QR code that goes to Bricklink or something like that. And I didn't even know that you had updated it to have basically a website for each piece.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if on your labels, if possible, to affix a QR code to where when I run out of something, I can just scan that thing really quickly and get to that page where you've already done that work. Okay. We're working on it on our end, but if you are interested in that, I know that's an insane task, but just trying to find the way to make it as easy as possible to order more of that piece.
Awesome. So just to restate what I heard as your question for the group and for myself.
Yes.
You're using my labels or similar labels on Ziploc bags, and you've got the high-res little image and the text right next to it. And the ask is, could there also be a QR code so that when you run out of the part, you could just scan it with your phone instead of typing it out.
Exactly.
Get back to the website for that part, and then you can go to Bricklink or Rebrickable or Lego.com or whatever.
That's it.
That's a great question. I think it'd be pretty easy for me to add that so that you might have two different labels, one with and one without.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah,
cool.
That seems totally doable. I have to look into the exact process of generating QR on the fly, but I've thought about it.
Cool.
And knowing that someone wants it makes me put it a little higher on the backlog.
Oh man, you have made my day. Thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
of course. Oh, we got an online question.
So we have a question from online, which is, what is the reasoning behind combining plates, bricks, and tiles into your section?
Actually, I think the best way to explain that is that the 12 categories I've settled on represent the 12 concepts within Lego that you kind of have to grok if you're going to be a builder. And from a conceptual perspective, the difference between a brick, plate, and even a tile is how tall they are and whether there's a stud on the top. But they still fundamentally all connect using that simple stud and tube connection style. So the chapter text, which is that page that I've got a couple passed around and we saw on the screen a little bit before, is all about, from a system perspective, how those pieces work together and how it takes 3 plates to equal the height of a brick, and then you can build out from that concept. The thing that I want to be super clear about with both my labels, the parts guide, etc., is this is not meant to be a prescriptive, like thou shalt sort your Lego in this way. It is much more supposed to be, here's a good framework for how you might want to organize your collection. And if the bulk of your collection is basic bricks, plates, and tiles, treat those as individual top-level categories. Split them out, if you will. And that makes total sense for a lot of builders. You're an experienced builder, you can handle more than 12 top-level concepts. But the thinking is that by simplifying the top-level concepts for people, it makes the whole hobby more approachable. And hopefully we can get even more people at BrickCon next year because we're bringing more people into the fold through sort of simplifying our hobby. So.
Yeah, thanks. I need to take another look at the website because it seems like a really useful resource. One of my main frustrations with trying to find Lego is using Pick-a-Brick. Which may be a moot point now, I don't know. But I can never find anything on there because they use weird names. And so my current process is I go to Bricklink, where I can find the thing, and I find a number, and I type that into Brickset, which gives me a different number, which I plug in to pick a brick, and that drives me crazy. So one thing I've looked for and haven't been able to find online is a Bricklink to pick a brick dictionary. So what do they call jumpers over there? Can someone just tell me, please? Can I look that up?
Yeah. This resource does do that, because if you were to click, let's say you search for a part, you can even use the search box.
Yeah.
You can search for the part, you find the page on the website, and then it shows the part name on all 5 of those other websites, as well as the part number for all 5 of those different websites. And you'll start to notice the pattern to the chaos, which is Lego's part naming, which is pretty terrible. In fact, there's spelling issues. There's a lot of quirks because a lot of these names were made by non-native English speakers 30 years ago. And for consistency purposes, they just leave these weird names in place. Yeah. So that's probably your best bet. You can keep doing what you're doing, but you can at least skip one step if you use this tool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think,
yeah.
I mean, I'll definitely give that a look. I think it would also be helpful just to have a short page of jumper. This is what a jumper is on Pick-a-Brick. This is what a rod is on whatever.
That is an interesting idea, which is essentially expanding on the concept of the glossary that I glossed over earlier, by having Lego calls this blah. Yeah. That's interesting. Thank you. Thanks. I like that idea.
Thank you for doing this. I do most of my designing in Bricklink Studio, so most of it's digital. Would you ever consider creating a plugin that we could somehow plug into Studio to reorganize their parts with your, you know what I mean, with your categories? And I don't even know if that'd be possible.
I don't even know if that's possible, but I think it's a really interesting idea to see if you can intercept their hierarchy. Maybe it's an XML file or something, and just be here, replace that garbage with this other thing. That's cool. I have not thought about it. If anyone does know anything about the feasibility of that or even how to do it, let me know. Because if it were trivial to create an XML file or something, it might be possible for me to output programmatically. So whenever I make changes, it would ripple.
Thank you.
It's a good idea. Do you have an online question? Yeah.
So the next online question is, whose bulk collection is the most organized that you know of?
Actually, the answer is probably my own, because until recently, every single part, I actually had 2 years ago, I came to BrickCon, and I actually sorted all of my parts from BrickCon by Tuesday, and they were all in my bins. Right now, I have a fair amount of parts that are sorted by category, but not part, because the bins they go into next are kind of full. So I don't know. Most people have a huge unsorted bin. I have a small one. I don't know. I also recognize that I actually think one of the reasons I've slacked a little bit on my sorting is there is a point of diminishing returns for sorting, where like it is fine if you have a bunch of extra drawers to have a drawer for minifig handcuffs, but if you only have 3 of them, you could probably just put them in the minifig accessories, other drawer, and just like until there's 10 handcuffs, they can just be in the other drawer. And I feel like I'm allowing myself to loosen a little bit on that because it's just kind of ridiculous to have drawers with 2 parts in them. So
that actually ties into my comment, question, request that you do all my work for me. What I really liked about your categories for the parts is that the 16 categories is something your mind can handle. And what I want is sort of a fractal explosion where you do the first pass on the bulk bin and put things into 16 buckets.
Yep.
Then you pick up the bucket that is full and break it into 12 buckets.
Mm-hmm.
Then you pick up the bucket that's most full and put that into 6 buckets. And then, like you said, anything, the other 4 buckets over here, there's 8 pieces, and I don't care. That's that bucket. And so if you could turn it into a hierarchy, well, I'm buying your book either way.
Yeah.
But if you make the hierarchy, then it's both the hashing function, so you can find things where you go to the end until you have a bucket, then you take it out. Otherwise, you follow the process to find the right bucket. Because right now, the number of MISC buckets we have, like this is weird plate, and this is bionicle, and this is all of that other stuff. I just want to have an algorithm that makes sense at every stage. And if it doesn't make sense, we'll click through. But then we can sort things correctly, because my wife and I share sorting duties, and we can sometimes have different thoughts about what goes where.
Yes.
And if it's your fault, then we don't have to blame each other.
Okay. That's a twist. I like the twist at the end. The first part I want to answer is that it already does have multiple levels of hierarchy. So you're describing when you're describing a hierarchical system, you can talk about the depth of the hierarchy, like how many folders within folders within folders does it get? And I believe it gets to 4 levels in a couple places, where like you've got, especially Technic. Technic is a very large category. And like, this is way outside the scope of this conversation, but Technic is actually at this point a mature building system of its own that could exist without studs at all. So like, you could almost write a Lego Technic guide that's separate from a Lego brick-based guide, and that would hold up from a storytelling perspective. But so Technic, to use the example, goes a little bit deeper. Like you've got Technic, and then you've got subpart folders for like connectors, and I think there's even sub within connector. It just needs more hierarchy to like really wrangle that system.
So I guess the other follow-up there is that if you don't, for the parts you're not including, just sort of the description of what this bucket is overall.
Yeah.
So the parts that you're not explicitly listing, things I had 7 of because I stole them from my brother in the 70s.
Yeah.
Where do they go? That is for the parts you're not mentioning, I want to know where to put them.
I think that, okay, yes, the question is essentially, okay, so here's a guide of the 2,500 most common parts and where to put them. Where do I put the 2,501st part? Mm-hmm. And I think, I look forward to feedback from others, but I think that there's enough examples in the guide that it should be mostly obvious where other things should slot in. There's going to be weird parts. Like there's a couple, I'll give an example recently that was making me crazy. I had a 13th category until, I've got 5 minutes, okay. I had a 13th category called Other. And I don't know if anyone's, those Friends little boxes that pop open that have like a space to put a minifigure inside, and there's been balls that open and stuff like that? It's a container. Where does a container fit in this system? Like, it's not really Technic, it's not really any of these other things. I think I put it in the windows and panels category because I just had to put it somewhere. And it's got a big, round plastic surface. It kind of looks like a panel. But there's going to always be arbitrary ones that don't fit super well. And honestly, just do your best is my answer. Okay, question.
Next online question is, have you considered pulling 3D parts from Unity? They sometimes have more than are available in LDRAW.
Perfect question. I can answer super quickly. No, I have not considered doing it myself because instead I asked the people on LDRAW to do it for me. They have recognized the fact that the data structure of Unity is very similar to LDRAW, and there have been a lot of new parts in the last couple years because of that opportunity. And I saw you nodding about that, so they're on it. Actually, I'm happy to say that the number 835th or so most common part was a DUPLO flower with 5 points on it. It just got added in the last month. I was stoked about that. We now have the top 1,000 current parts all in Eldra.
Mine's not really a question, but more of a statement that kind of answering some questions for other people. One of the things I always have trouble is trying to figure out what the number is. And cell phones have been amazing because for two things, you can zoom in to read the numbers when they have the numbers on them. You can also use like the Google Lens to scan it, and Google will tell you, hey, that's this part.
Yeah.
So for the people who are trying to figure out what a part is, to look it up on your guide, to look up things,
Yeah.
those are two key things using my cell phone that have helped a lot in the last few years.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think we have time for one more, so.
Okay. I was thinking with the commonality charts you had in the logarithmic scale chart. So if I do a lot of programming in like the powered up application, right? And in the powered up application, they have an icon where it's like 1 brick, 2 bricks, or 3 bricks based on complexity of the programming functions. So I was thinking if you have that logarithmic number, you could probably give every single part rating a commonality score. So if somebody's like interested on building something with only common bricks, they could just set it to like 1. But I would just set it to like max right away if I could.
This is a great question to close with, which is essentially, okay, if we're going to try to talk about what are the most common parts, can we actually start applying like common, uncommon, and rare style thinking? That I'm borrowing that from many years ago playing Magic. But like it's possible is the answer. I've actually tried to rank the colors as being common, uncommon, and rare in the past as well. The challenge is it's not 15 card pack with 1 rare and 3 uncommons. Like that logarithmic curve makes the rare parts crazy rare. I just have chosen not to do that yet. I might look into it in the future, especially as I keep adding more and more parts from that long tail into the guide. But I think you could really think, if you want to use that logic, the guide aims to include commons, uncommons, and rares, but not, what are they calling them? Ultra rares? Legendary rares? I can't keep up. But like, try to get you through the majority of them. Did we have one more question, or are we at time?
The online community says to add brick organize as well.
Brick organize, okay. As a source for categories, or was it not clear? Okay, I'll look into it. Awesome. Are we good? Okay.
I think this will be fast.
That's fine.
Painted, stickered parts. How are you addressing those in your system?
I'm completely ignoring printed and stickered parts. I feel like they're really central to Lego, and like really artistic, skilled builders use printed parts really, really well. But I just don't think that it's practical to try to, say, recreate what's already on Bricklink. Like when you're designing anything, software, etc., a book, you have to decide what you're good at and what you're just not going to try to solve, and that's just in the category of things I've chosen not to try to solve. Because I just don't think it scales. But that's one of those places where I like, go to Bricklink. Or Rebrickable too, has most of them. So thank you all so much. I'll be around the whole weekend. I should have an update. I have 5 copies of an updated draft of the book. They were supposed to come yesterday. They didn't. But I'll have them probably tomorrow at BrickCon, so come find me and you can thumb through the guide in its current form. And I really do want honest and critical feedback because like I want to make this really useful and I want to make it really useful for y'all. So thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. So cool. Thank you.